All right, welcome to the Fit Foodie Roadshow, episode 6. Today I have with me my dear friend, Jolie Grindstaff, who is Jolie Donohue. Oh my God, I have been doing this all week. I'm so sorry. I have been calling people their maiden names all week. Ridiculous. Welcome, first of all. Thank you for being here. I want to introduce you a little bit to who Jolie is and what she does. She is affectionately known as the gardening goddess. She's actually a therapeutic gardening specialist, garden designer, consultant, educator, and writer in Portland, Oregon. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Child Development from Mills College, is a certified qualified mental health associate, and spent 15 years working with special needs children and at-risk families as a child development specialist, certified drug and alcohol counselor, and program manager. Her post-baccalaureate education includes certificates in modern organic farming, home horticulture, and holistic nutrition. She worked in the nursery and floral design industry for 8 years before starting her own business, The Gardening Goddess, in 2015. And through her small business, she provides garden design, planting plans, container design, and garden consultation. She's also a wedding and special event floral designer. She is passionate about the slow flower movement and crafting with seasonal, locally grown nature. I've been part of a wedding that you did, and it was gorgeous, like mind-blowingly gorgeous. She also teaches exquisite seasonal wreaths, teaches holiday wreath making, and creates exquisite seasonal wreaths. And since 2008, Jolie has actually taught gardening classes in a variety of venues. So that includes Portland Nursery. She's a part-time instructor at Portland Community College, Mount Hood Community College, and she's a popular speaker at local garden clubs and conferences. And in response to the current pandemic, she's actually just completely transitioned all of her gardening classes to a virtual format, which is no small feat, kind of wild. And in addition to being the sole proprietor of the Gardening Goddess, Jolie is the Cascade Learning Garden Coordinator at Portland Community College. She manages the college edible garden that grows produce given freely to the students and demonstrates small-scale urban agriculture, serves as a learning laboratory for community-based learning across disciplines, and building community partnerships. She believes in the inherent healing power of nature and is passionate about connecting people with nature. I love that. Her mission is to heal people, communities, and the earth one garden at a time. She completed her horticultural therapy core coursework and internship at Legacy Health with internationally recognized horticultural therapist Teresa Hazen. Am I pronouncing that right?
Teresa,
okay. Mm-hmm. Her 969-hour horticultural therapy internship included practice with a wide variety of populations and diagnoses with children, adults, and seniors. Jolie's therapeutic horticulture work has included pediatrics, the Rehabilitative Institute of Oregon, assisted living, long-term care, skilled nursing, and memory care. She's facilitated a garden summer day camp for Shriners Children's Hospital. I didn't know all this stuff about you. This is so fun. Assisted with the garden program at Coffee Creek Correctional Institution and Village Gardens Urban Agricultural Program. And annually, she volunteers with the Senior Gardening Days at Portland Nursery. Jolie is a leader in her profession as a former coordinator of the Northwest Therapeutic Horticultural Networking Group and a member of the host committee for the 2015 American Horticultural Therapy Association Annual Conference. She was a contract gardener for the award-winning hospital Healing Gardens at Legacy Health. And for 3 years, Jolie was the therapeutic gardening program coordinator at Stevens Place in Vancouver, Washington. I remember that. She was the founder of this innovative year-round therapeutic garden program and the designer of the therapeutic garden incorporating the therapeutic garden characteristics outlined by the American Horticultural Therapy Association. She provided a social garden club, vocational training, individual sessions, field trips, and family events for adults with intellectual, developmental, and physical disabilities. In this role, she facilitated intergenerational programming with the neighborhood kindergarten, coordinated an annual plant sale, quarterly family events, planned year-round food production, and supported the marketing staff with social media photographs and stories. And we're going to talk more about how to actually reach you, find you, work with you, read your work as we get towards the end of the episode. But oh my God, first of all, how fun is it to just like have my friend on here and brag about all her accomplishments? I love that so much. And just really thank you for being here with us today. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me. And as you were reading my bio, which I'm of course familiar with, I was thinking, I've had an amazing professional life. It's been so fun to do all the things that I've done.
I love that. And I feel like what an amazing privilege to just like do something for work. I feel like this every day that I get to like sign on to a Zoom call with a client. Like what an amazing privilege to do something for work that feels so fun and is so rewarding. Like how cool is that?
Absolutely.
Well, so first of all, I would love to just get a little bit, I always like to ask people like, how did you get into this profession? What was your path to like gardening as a job? And I know you've had a huge healing journey yourself. You know, we share similar autoimmune, similar kind of like physical diagnoses, and we've talked a lot about that. But what got you into gardening?
Yeah, so I did not grow up gardening. I did not have a family that gardened at all. I grew up in the 1970s in the San Francisco Bay Area in the suburbs. So track homes, lawns, no gardening, no one talking about gardening. And my mom came from a corn farm in Nebraska, and very much was a part of the middle class mentality, right? Of moving on up off the farm, bigger, better, move on. So there was really not any gardening growing up for me. There was nature. We had a Winnebago and we'd go camping and we'd go to all around the country to state parks and national parks. So I had nature growing up, but there really was no gardening. And my career was initially, doing work with children and with families and not gardening. And what happened was when the Great Recession hit in the early mid 2000s, which is kind of happening again on a bigger scale right now. But when that happened, I was laid off 2 times in a row within a year, once from my alcohol and drug counseling job and then from my faculty job. And during the recession, I could not find a job to save my life, honestly. I was babysitting, doing day labor, doing everything I could just scrape by and survive. It was a very hard time. And so I took a seasonal temporary job at Portland Nursery, a retail plant nursery, because to get by, I'd been working at a department store is one of the things I was doing. So I had some very current retail experience. So they were really excited about that. So they hired me. I thought I would be there a couple months. I was planning on the whole time I was there, I was applying to go back to nonprofit. And it was the recession. So I wasn't even getting callbacks for interviews. And within a couple months, they hired me on permanent at the nursery. And that was 2008. And I have really never looked back. It was a magical midlife career to transition to horticulture. I did not intend for that to happen. I thought I would go back to kids and families and alcohol and drug treatment and nonprofit work. And the nursery gave me a education tuition benefit. And I used it every year I was there to do all those certificates that I did, and just decided to stay in horticulture. And it was such a magical fit for me.
Oh my goodness. That's so cool. What a great benefit.
Absolutely. So I was able to do my home horticulture certificate with Oregon State. And then I went up to Washington State University Extension and did my modern organic farming on small acreage, which was really awesome. And then went to Portland Community College to do my horticultural therapy certificate and started down that road. And I was gardening at the time. So let's preface with that. I had not gardened growing up,
For
I
sure.
planted my first garden when I was 25, when I was living in San Francisco. At that time, no one was gardening. It was not a hip thing for young people to do. I had moved into this flat, and it had a really overgrown secret garden in the backyard. And as
Wow.
I started picking through what was going on back there and getting rid of the weeds, there were like climbing roses and geraniums all the way up a fence, and these ginormous Mexican sage and cactus and jade plants like you can grow in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And it was lovely. And so I gardened there. I did not know what I was doing. I was completely self-taught. No other 20-somethings were gardening. I had no one to talk to. We'd all go out to the bar at night, and then the next morning I'd get up and I'd work in the garden. And so when I moved to Portland in 2000, I was gardening those 8 years until I took the job at Portland Nursery. Really didn't know what I was doing, was having lots of failure, but lots of fun, and just expanded my skills once I got all that education being at the nursery surrounded by plants.
Oh, I bet. What a dream.
Yeah.
I lived in the Bay Area for a while, and I remember running. I was in this running group, and I would run through Golden Gate Park, and just some of the plants that you're talking about. Like I feel like I've seen even in people's backyards, like those overgrown magical secret gardens that the Bay Area has. And I could totally picture it with the cactus, like just all of the mix of things that grows in that climate. That's so fun. So, okay, so you went from gardening to learning more about gardening to then like horticultural therapy, which seems, knowing your background, like that seems like a good fit, but I feel like people have no idea, A, that it exists, B, what it is. We know art therapy, music therapy, retail therapy, like we know about a lot of different things, but can you just quick educate us? What is garden therapy? What is horticultural therapy?
Yeah, so horticulture therapy actually has a very long history, and we can trace our roots back to Benjamin Rush, who was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was the founder of the American psychiatry movement, and he documented the benefits of being in nature and working with nature with people with mental illness. So that's what we trace our roots back to. And then really it was post-World War II when there were hospitalized veterans going through rehabilitative programs, which was also the beginning of occupational therapy and some other things. They were putting veterans in garden settings to work, and then that really gave credibility to our field. And then it was round about the 70s and 80s that the American Horticultural Therapy Association came about. So if people are more interested, that's a great thing to check out, is the American Horticultural Therapy Association, which is AHTA as what they are called. And so horticultural therapy is defined as someone who is a registered horticultural therapist, is using plants and nature-based activities with clients to achieve a treatment outcome. And then we play on the words with therapeutic horticulture, and so you just kind of reverse those two things. And therapeutic horticulture are people who are trained in horticulture therapy but are not registered horticultural therapists, and that's the category I fall into. And we're basically doing the same similar-ish work. We just have different training. So for me, I have all the training of a registered horticultural therapist, but horticulture therapy is not a insurance billable treatment. It made no financial sense for me to become a registered horticultural therapist. I just did all the training and I do the work. And that is really well for me. So that's what therapeutic horticulture is. So you would see people doing horticulture therapy or therapeutic horticulture in a variety of different settings, like medical, vocational, or social programs. So some examples of that. So from my experience, when I interned in the Rehabilitative Institute of Oregon, we were treating patients in a medical setting that had traumatic brain injury, stroke, amputation, and those patients, we were using plants and plant activities to support their physical, occupational and speech therapy goals.
So
And
cool.
we were, yeah. And then if we're working, say, like when I did my work at Stevens Place and I was working with folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I did a vocational program. So I was teaching people pre-vocational and vocational skills with plants. So they could train to be a greenhouse technician, an interior plant technician. When I worked with seniors, I was developing treatment plans to help people with dementia, or people who were recovering from stroke, or just general wellness and well-being for people who live in long-term care. So a lot of really neat applications for therapeutic horticulture. People often say, are you giving therapy to plants? I'm not giving therapy to plants.
Opposite.
Yeah, I'm using plants as my therapeutic medium in the work that I do with people. So,
Love it.
yeah.
That's so cool. And there have been so many studies of like the microbiome and soil-based probiotics and like the physical therapeutic applications of just like putting your hands in the dirt and growing your own food and like eating it out of the ground versus, you know, the disinfecting process that it goes through the store. So like it's just a very holistic application, it seems like.
It is, and I'm glad that you brought up the research, because people, we inherently know in our gut that nature makes us feel better, right? We know that. We just have this sense that when you're in nature, you feel better than when you do when you're in front of the TV or someplace else, right? But there's so much research there is so much scientific research that backs it up. You were talking about some of the things like there's a bacteria that we interact with in the soil that boosts our serotonin in the brain. So you get hands in the dirt, serotonin booster, amazing. But there have been so many different research studies that have shown, I'm going to talk about a couple of those, that we go in nature, and whether we're in nature or even a passive view. So a passive view of nature can be looking out your window, not even going outside, looking out your window, or having a beautiful garden calendar above your desk. It does not matter what the view of nature is. When we look at nature, research has shown that our heart rate slows, our blood pressure lowers, and our muscle tension relaxes.
Wow.
And it happens within about less than a minute. It's really fast.
Wow.
So there are actual physiological changes that happen when we're in nature, which is amazing. There have been studies with inmates in corrections, and if they have a view of nature outside their window in their cell or their dorm or wherever they are, that they can look out at nature, there are less problems. Like there are less calls with the corrections officers. There's less violence.
Wow.
It's been studied. With surgical patients, if surgical patients in the hospital have a view out the window, I love it was researched, less negative notes from the chart notes from the nurse. They had a view out, the patient had a view out the window. So I guess they're calling the nurse less. It was documented they needed less pain medication if they had a view of nature. And then with students, if students are exposed to nature prior to taking a test, it dramatically lowers not only their test anxiety, but it increases their attention to the task and gets them higher test scores. So there's a tremendous amount of research that backs this up. And so much so, Legacy Health has done a lot of studies with horticulture therapy and the healing power of nature. So a couple years ago, they designed a study to do with the birth, labor and delivery ward. And there's a beautiful garden right outside of labor and delivery, therapeutic garden at the hospital. So all of the incoming moms, they said, we're going to do this study. Would you participate in this study? And we're going to have laboring mothers walk through the garden while they're laboring and see how that affects the laboring process. They actually could not do the study because not one mother was willing to be put into the group that wouldn't be able to go into the garden.
Right?
Mm-hmm. They all said, we're not willing to take the chance of being in the study group that doesn't get to go in the garden. So they actually had to completely check that entire research study.
That is hilarious. That makes so much sense.
Right?
To not go walk in nature. And like, it's so great just from an ancestral health perspective, like the idea that we are meant to be in nature. We evolved with nature. We, you know, until we didn't have whatever body hair, you know, like we were out there in the elements every day. And so of course, like our bodies are going to respond to that in a really positive way. That's so cool. I love that you can just rattle off those studies.
That would be my mentor, Teresa Hazen, who I interned with and studied with. I mean, she has us very well schooled on what all the research is, because it justifies our career, and it justifies when we need funding for things. So if insurance isn't going to have horticulture therapy as a billable service, like art therapy, music therapy, speech therapy, these other things, we have to justify why would you invest in a horticulture therapy program? Why is this something that you would want to do? And there's just so much research. It's amazing. Yeah.
So cool. That's so cool. So a lot of these companies or hospitals or organizations that bring you in or would bring in horticultural therapists are doing it just because they want to invest in it, because they see the value in it. They're not getting reimbursed for it.
That is correct. Now, most often horticulture therapy is happening in senior living. So it's happening in assisted living, long-term care, skilled nursing, memory care for dementia, and it falls under the activities department. So the activity director will hire someone to come in and bring horticulture therapy in and pay for the service. That way is a part, because often even in the senior environment, we're not even going out to the garden. It's happening at bedside. So I'm bringing plants and flowers to people's bedside, or we're doing a garden club inside in a small group inside, and we're doing nature-based activities that aren't necessarily gardening. They're just plant-based activities, because we can go anywhere. I mean, we're very portable. Plants and flowers and activities go in a basket under my arm, and I'm good to go down a hospital ward, visiting people bedside, and bringing them nature. And there's no shortage of folks that want that. When you're bed bound, you really want that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think a lot of people that are now, you know, in the US, I haven't seen this as much, but in other countries, a lot of my friends are just confined to their homes or their apartments. They're not even able to go out and go for walks unless they have a dog. I think that's the only exception. So anything that we can do to bring nature inside, especially if you don't have, you know, maybe they're in an apartment building that faces not out, right? They face a courtyard or something like that. So I want to come back to that, like what people can do while they're inside. But I first am curious about how you have switched from, so obviously, yes, it's very portable, but you had these gardens, you had all these locations where you were teaching, where you were sitting with people and having our hands in the dirt together. How have you switched to teaching online, and what does that look like? Like if I were to take a class with you, what does that even look like?
Right. So like most educators, all of us that have had to transition to virtual with absolutely no notice, right? all college educators, all elementary, high school, all of us have been burning the midnight oil trying to figure out how to do this. So for me, how that has transitioned is getting everything on slides. So I was not a PowerPoint teacher. I've been teaching gardening for 12 years, and I have never put anything on a PowerPoint. I have some photos. I show some laminated photos in the class, but mostly we talk, and then there's some demonstration, and I have plants. So the blessing, the silver lining in the pandemic is it's forced me to get all of my classes on slides, which I'm about halfway there. So I have slides, and I've tried to incorporate photos in them. And what I've tried to do is I've been going into my own garden and taking videos of my own garden and photos of my own garden to show people this is how you can do this on a very small scale. These are the sizes of containers. This is all of that. So what you would expect in a virtual class is it's like this, that we're all there in gallery view together so everybody can see. And I've had some classes with 3 people. I've had some classes with 15 people. And then there's a slideshow. And then we have conversation and dialogue, because I can lecture for 2 hours. I got it all in me. I got lots to offer. But as a teacher, I like, hearing people's questions and answering those questions and having a really personal experience. So in a virtual class, you will get a slideshow, you'll get photos, you'll get lots of information, you'll get answers to your questions. You'll hear from the other people in the class how they're gardening, what their suggestions are, what's worked for them. And I think it's worked really well. So I am doing all of the virtual classes via my business, but then in my role at PCC, I'm doing that once or twice a week for our staff to keep everybody excited about doing a victory garden right now, because it's so important. So I would say at this point in the past month, I've probably taught close to 20 virtual gardening classes. So I'm a pro at this point.
That's amazing. And yeah, it was with no notice. It was like all of a sudden, yeah, schools are closed, work it out. So
Yep.
yeah, any educators that are doing that with, I mean, I've been online for years, so I feel like, thank God I didn't have to change very much. But yeah, any educators that are having to do that, especially when you have a hands-on, like art or science or gardening or something like that, a hands-on topic. It's, yeah, my hat is off to you. That is amazing.
And I'm just so, we got shelter at home in Portland. It was about March 20th or so.
Mm-hmm.
And that spring, it literally timed with spring equinox. So it timed with the week that our gardening season began here in Portland, Oregon. And so usually this is when I pack the bulk of my seasonal business, is in March, April, May, and a little into June. And it's a very timely thing. People need this information now. It's not something that can wait until we slowly reopen the states. It's something that people need to know now. And nurseries and feed stores are considered essential businesses. So they have been allowed to stay open.
Nice.
And so some people are doing online orders, curbside, push out. Some places are large enough they can stay open. But gardening has not been canceled. Spring has not been canceled. And now more than ever, people are home, they're bored, they need constructive things to do, and everyone wants some food security. Right. It's very scary being faced with this economic crisis that we're being plunged into. So it's empowering to know that you could grow some of your own food, even if it's not about natural, organic, health, even if it's not even that. It's about you being able to know, I can go out to my garden and I'm going to have carrots or potatoes or tomatoes or kale. You can do that, and you can control that and know that that food source is waiting for you.
Yeah, that's hugely empowering. And I think, even though the supply chain is not completely disrupted, I know I've had clients that are on very restricted diets because of food allergies. They go to the grocery store and, a particular vegetable that they were counting on for the week is completely sold out. For some reason, everyone bought the cauliflower in Federal Way, Washington, or whatever, and so to have that knowledge and ability to grow your own food, seeds are pretty cheap, starts are pretty cheap, dirt is pretty cheap. And so, to have that just little bit of investment, for people who don't necessarily, I know you have a smaller lot, you're not on acreage, and you grow a ton of your own food, which is super inspiring. But for people who don't necessarily have a yard, or maybe they rent and they are not allowed to dig in the dirt, do you have what are the easiest container veggies that people can grow? Do you have some tips for people who want to just I mean, an herb garden on the windowsill is sort of, you know we can do that, but what about like actual vegetables? What can we grow inside?
Yeah, so it's the inside piece that's the challenge, because inside plants are never getting the sunlight that they need. It's always diffused coming in the house. So that's going to be the main problem with indoor growing for people. But even if you have a space on the front step or the back step for some containers, and trying to push out of the house, there's some things you could try inside, but I just encourage people to re-examine the existing space that they do have, because we've always been renters. We don't own land. And I have lived in apartments and grown gardens. And here we knew we were only going to be here for a little over a year. So we didn't want to dig in the ground. And so just with thinking about, like, we have one raised bed, we have a galvanized agricultural trough and a whole and those are very popular in Portland, and you can get a lot of veggies. It's basically like just a ready to go raised bed alternative, and a galvanized agricultural trough. And feed stores stay open in a state of emergency. They're an essential service. So that's something people could access. But some of the easiest veggies to grow in containers, all of your leafy greens. So
Right.
kale, collards, lettuce, spinach, chard, all of your greens, great in containers, and some of the easiest hassle-free crops to grow. The easiest root crops to grow are going to be radishes.
Ooh.
And second to that, carrots. And if you're growing carrots in containers, there are round Parisian carrots. They don't develop long roots. They're round. So they grow, you could have a very shallow container. So literally on your front porch, you could have like a 12-inch window box, a little plastic window box you sit, and you could have lettuce and a couple Parisian carrots and some radishes, and there's your salad. Nice. If you have a little bigger container, the hands down easiest veggies to grow in containers are potatoes. Not sweet potatoes, potatoes. So easy. You plant one seed potato, you will harvest 50 to 75 potatoes from one potato. So it is the best bang for your buck, and they're nutrient powerhouses. I know some people don't like them, but like, it's such great bang for buck for your family.
Don't like potatoes. Wait, hold on. People don't like potatoes?
Everybody likes potatoes. Some people are like, I don't eat potatoes. I only eat sweet potatoes or whatever. But they're so good.
I get it. Sometimes they are nightshades, right? So some people can't have them, but
true that.
God, they're so delicious.
They are. And some other things that would be good in containers. We talked about all the herbs. Pretty much all herbs are going to be great in a container. Other things for containers, you can do beans and peas in a container if it's deep enough.
Do they have to have something to climb?
They do. They climb up. So that's why I say you want a deeper container, because they get top heavy. So it needs to be able to weather that. But those are pretty easy. And I think that tomatoes can be pretty easy to grow in a container. Doesn't have to be large. And last year I experimented with, I grew cucumbers, summer squash, zucchini, and winter squash all in 18-inch plastic containers. Wow. And they grew great. Wow. So they spilled out, so they need the plant sprawl, so it needs a little space, but none of that. I have no food in the ground, and I grow probably close to 40 different food crops in a series of containers in one raised bed.
That's amazing.
You don't need a lot of space. I really want to impress on people, like, you can start small with what you have. And if what you have is only the house, right, the apartment, you don't have any outdoor space, I would say your best bets inside are lettuce and salad greens, and harvesting them prior to like full heading size, but like how you would clip loose greens. So any like muskellin mix, baby lettuce, microgreens, sprouts grow great, right? Sprouts and microgreens grow great in the house. Those would be things that people could do in the house. And then I would say if you were trying to get something really close to a window, you could dive into kale, collard, spinach, chard, the larger greens.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would it make sense to even try like those full spectrum light bulbs or grow lights if you don't have a good window situation?
Yeah, so if you have a setup that you could have a rack with a light, or even, it would not have to be expensive, a table you could devote to that the cat wasn't going to jump up and eat everything, right? And yes, if you got a grow light, that would be great. And then I think you could try even more types of crops, but at the very minimum, that kind of light situation would give you much more success with all of those greens.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh my God, this is really exciting. This is getting me excited. I told you before I'm doing microgreens in the house, which feels very manageable, and it's at a spot where the cat can't get to it, but you know, we have room to do it outside. So just even starting them in containers, I did not even consider growing winter squash in a container. So that is a very exciting thought for me.
Yeah.
So for people who want to try to do organic, I mean, that's one of the cool things about growing your own food is you can control, you know, what goes in it, what goes on it, what you're feeding those crops. Is there a particular like soil blend or something to look for when I'm looking for, because I'm not necessarily looking for potting soil for flowers kind of thing, right? So if I'm at the store or I'm doing curbside pickup, what am I looking for as far as dirt goes? And then do you have any favorite like natural pesticides that you like? And obviously you're an expert on Portland, you know, so I don't know, you know, how well that will translate, but I'm just curious if you have any special things that you like to use for pests.
Yeah, well, I think the soil component and then the natural techniques is it translates everywhere for all of us. So when we're gardening in a container, soil and dirt, all of these words get used, compost, planting mix, all get used interchangeably. And really, soil is only something that's in the ground. Like that's it, that's soil. Like something that's created in the ground with the microorganisms and the biodegrading plant material. So when a package says potting soil, that is what you want for your container veggie garden. But you made a really good point, Michelle, in that if you're growing your food, you don't necessarily want a potting soil that has a synthetic fertilizer in it that's for the flowers you might grow in pots, because you're introducing that into your food. So when we grow vegetables in containers, we do want a packaged potting soil. Ground soil dug up from the yard is too heavy to go in a container culture. Your plants are going to suffer in that. Though I will say, if you are on a really tight budget, use what you have. Don't go buy the potting soil. If you need to grow some food for your family and you don't have a lot of money, dig up the soil from the yard or wherever. So that's my disclaimer about that. Like work with what you have. But we want to go for potting soil, and you want to go for organic potting soil. The organic doesn't refer to the soil, it refers to the fertilizer that's in it. So when you purchase potting soil, ask for potting soil with no fertilizer, or if it has fertilizer in it, you want organic potting soil. And you're going to use that to completely fill up your containers.
Nice.
Now, if you're looking to garden organically, so the definition of organic is that we're not using any synthetic, meaning a chemical, a person-made pesticide, herbicide, or fertilizer or fungicide in the garden. There are a whole range of organic products that are organic, OMRI approved organic pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and fertilizers. That just means they're derived from plants and animals versus a chemical. It does not mean they do not have toxicity to the world around us. So my own personal journey was, I was a conventional gardener when I started, and I used a lot of conventional fertilizers that I won't mention because I don't want to get in trouble with liability. So I'd use the most popular yellow box with the black circle on it, and I'd put that all around the garden. And then I was like, at some point I was like, I'm going to be organic. I want to go all natural. So all I did was I swapped out a chemical for an organic chemical, right? So I kept spraying everything in the garden. Oh my God, pests, organic. Okay, organic. And then I started to find out when I researched that those organic pesticides were actually had major toxicity to bees, to butterflies, to wildlife. And so I have taken the path of being no spray, is what I call myself now. I'm no spray organic, and I really encourage people, if they're going to use a product, even if it says it's organic, to understand what is going to happen to our environment with that product. And I learned that from the Xerces Society, Xerces with an X. Xerces Society, they're the invertebrate conservation organization based in Portland, but they have had a major contribution to the world when it's come to saving the butterflies and the bees and things. So I just aim at, rather than seeing a problem and me needing to treat it, I trust Mother Nature to take care of a problem. So what I mean is, I'm trying to mimic Mother Nature in my garden. So I'm not going to plant an entire garden of potatoes. That is going to bring pest and disease down on me because it's monocropping. Mother Nature doesn't grow like that. Yeah. Mother Nature designs these beautiful ecosystems with all these different plants and this diversity and this wildlife, right? So in my garden, I'm going to plant lots of different vegetables, and I'm going to interplant them with herbs and flowers. Those herbs and flowers are going to attract beneficial bugs that are going to eat the pesky bugs. I'm going to learn how to rotate my crops, meaning I don't grow the same crop in the same space every year. That way pest and disease can't build up there. And then I'm not going to spray my garden, because when I don't spray my garden, all the little good guys, like the ladybugs and the bees, they come and they help take care of the problems for me. And then I'm mostly going to pay a lot of attention to my garden. We tend to have a lot of problems when we get busy and we see the garden is like this thing we go into 10 minutes a week. So even if we're busy and we're working, like we all are, we have a lot going on. But if I go out to my garden every day and I harvest and I just spend some time looking at everything, I notice the eggs on the leaves before they hatch into the caterpillar that eats everything. So I just try and spend more time in the garden. I think what I have seen as being the least toxic of all the natural approaches would be a homemade garlic clove spray. Okay. And that's something that you can make in the house with garlic cloves and clove buds, and you let it just sit there overnight. And then you can puree it. You just want to make sure it's not something that's going to clog the sprayer, the nozzle, and you can spray that on leaves, and it has like minimal to no toxicity to bees and other beneficial bugs, and it comes after the bad guys. So yeah, I just think there's much like life, there are no easy quick fixes to things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's so cool. I was thinking about the microbiome as you were talking, and just how it's like you want that diversity in your garden. You want the soil to be healthy, and that will take care of so many of the problems that crop up when we just only have, like you said, a monocrop. But of course, I'm thinking of like strains of bacteria. There's so many parallels with that. And I think what you're talking about with the crop rotation, like that's not, I've read a lot of gardening books and they talk about companion planting, right? But I don't know that crop rotation is something that that was even in the forefront of my mind before we had this conversation. But obviously, right, like nothing grows in seasons. Things grow in different places in different times, and we're seeing that as we go for our walks and see the different flowers that are blooming in the spring. And yeah, that's so much to think about, so many thoughts all at once.
And I start introducing crop rotation, I say, when people have been gardening for a couple years, because what I want people to know who are starting to garden or have been gardening for a while, I don't believe in the concept of a green thumb. Let's just chuck that out the door. There's no such thing as a green thumb. No one's born with a green thumb. No one develops a green thumb. gardening is a learnable, teachable skill that we learn through practice and through trial and error. And I still, all these years later, 25 years later, I still kill plants. There are still plants I can't grow. There are still bugs, bad bugs I get on plants. And so what I want the message to be is, one, this should be fun. Two, you're not going to know everything. I am still learning things. I am still consulting, like, oh, I got to go back and look at that pamphlet or that calendar. So I know. So I think people need to be gentle on themselves. They need to have fun. And if you, just like anything in life, if you learn a few skills, you're going to be more set up for success. And then when you have some experience, then you can build more skills, and those skills build on those skills. I just don't want people to give up. I want people to keep, we can be very excited about the idea of gardening. And like the first year we're gardening, especially given the pandemic and the financial crisis we're going into. But even without that, we're like, it's my first year gardening. I'm going to homestead for my whole family, and I'm going to grow, so I don't have to need the grocery store, and I'm going to can and preserve, right? It's a lot of work, and we get really excited, and I love that excitement. But I'm like, scale it back a little, and like, let's make a plan and make things more manageable, so that then we feel more successful when we actually try this, versus I'm going to plant 100 different crops and I'm going to aim for year-round food production. And then you get tired, or you're working, or the kids, or all the things, right, that get in the way. We scale it back a little bit, a little more small scale. We're successful. And then we feel confident to try a little more, and then a little more. And when it comes to crop rotating and companion planting, I have designed this system that makes it very simple, where you plant your companion flowers, you learn your plant families, then you move these little groups around the garden. So if people are interested, that's coming up on May 9th. It's a combined class for 1 hour. It's crop rotation and companion planting. It's a super simple system, and it does not matter where you live. It's going to be the same system and the same companion planting and rotating literally anywhere, on North America.
Yeah, because the families are the important piece, right? The
That's
plant
right.
families. You might have a different type of onion that works better in a particular climate or zone or whatever, but I don't know, I'm making it up. I don't know about onions, but okay, so that just gave me I just literally felt so much better about myself when you said that, about like setting yourself up for small wins and not trying to plant 100 things at once, because I did that. I planted veggies in containers last year, whenever we first moved into this house. And then our first round of mold hit, and I was like, I can't maintain all of this. And they're literally still sitting out there in pots, just dead. Just like, some of them have volunteered in other places. Some of them are dead. Some of them are, and I just could never get back to it. But I can see now that I started way too ambitiously. And I could have just started with greens and carrots and radishes, and then like tried that for a minute. Yeah. So I'm actually inspired to restart again. I did not think that was going to happen. So thank you for this conversation.
And we get tired, right? And you work with a lot of people. A lot of your clients have health conditions and have fatigue, and we can really get down on ourselves. We didn't get to talk about this too much, but when I was doing my horticultural therapist training in 2016, I just took a nosedive. I got sick, right? And then I got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and then like boom, 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 like 6 other medical conditions, all like over the course of a couple months. And I was so tired, and I had to leave my job. And I was like, I have this garden, this beautiful big garden, at the old house. And literally all I could do was sit in the garden that year and look at the garden. And that was fine, right? And it hurt me. I could not do more work in the garden, but it was my place of sanctuary, and I could sit there, and tend to myself until I felt better. And eventually I felt better, and then I could garden some more. And during that time, like writing about that process, I had so many people email me and tell me like, I have this illness, or I have this condition, and and I just want to sit in my garden, and thanks for sharing about that. And that, experience was really, it felt really hard to not be able to do all my gardening and not have stamina or
Right.
strength, and when I did try and work in the garden, I was like passing out and having to go to the emergency room, and it was a really, really hard year, but it got better. And so for me, like, even if we don't do a ton of gardening, even if we don't engage in a horticulture therapy program, there's such benefit to just sitting in the healing power of nature. I just really want to encourage people to do that. And I know that we have different sheltering at home guidelines based on the states and the countries that we're in. And I feel very grateful that here in Portland, we can still go on walks. And, as an immune compromised person, I walk at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
I don't walk later when there's other people around. I walk when I feel like I'm going to be safe, and I only sit in the backyard when I know the close by neighbors aren't out there. But like, as much as we can do that right now, it's just going to be better. My doctor prescribed like 30 minutes outside every day.
Nice.
What she told me, even with all my conditions. So that's what I'm telling everybody else. Get out there as much as you can safely.
Right. Yeah. Because if you need it, definitely everyone else needs it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Wow. This has been so cool, and I'm so inspired, and I have a little bunch of seeds that I've been messaging you about for months now that I'm going to go look and see what my potting soil situation is and get some in pots. So I so appreciate your time. I want to make sure people know how to reach you and how to find out. So you've written a book also, at least one, right? One book?
I have written a book, yes.
What is your book called again?
My book is called The Gardening Goddess Guide to Edible Gardening, that is yet to be published.
Oh,
it's out there. It'll be around sometime. You'll be able to buy it, more lessons in letting go.
Right. Oh my God.
It'll be out at some point. But
you do have your gardening classes. You do design and consultation services for people. You can help them figure out how to design their own garden. I know you've done that for several of our mutual friends. You also have a blog. You can go to joliedonohue.com. I will put that in the show notes, and follow the Gardening Goddess on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more gardening goodness. And all of your classes, people can sign up on your website, right?
Yes, if they go to the website, it's got all the classes, the registration info, and all design, consultation, and planting plans are happening virtually, which means I can help people all over the country right now with virtual consultation and design. So hit me up, please.
Yeah, I love it. All right, good. Well, thank you so much again, Jolie. I so appreciate your time, and it's so great to see you. And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Michelle.
You got it. Have a good day.